She saved a dying wolf in the forest. By dawn, he had become the alpha king she feared most. Mira Calloway had lived beside Blackthorn Forest her whole life, but she had not walked into it in 3 years. Not since the night her sister was attacked at the tree line, and no one, not the police, not the hunters, not the old men who sat outside the hardware store telling stories, ever found out what had done it. After that night, Mira built a fence around her life, the same way the town built fences around their yards. She worked the night shift at the Wildlife Rescue Center, fed injured foxes and orphaned owls, and never once let herself look toward the dark line of trees that started where the parking lot ended. That was the plan anyway, until the storm. It came in fast, the kind of storm that turned the sky green before anyone had time to prepare. By midnight, half the power lines in town were down, and by 1 in the morning, the rescue center's phone rang with the news Mira had been dreading. The back fence, the one that kept the recovering animals safe, had been torn open by a fallen tree. 2 of the animals were already found wandering the parking lot. A third, one of the rescue's young deer, was still missing, and it was Mira's job to find it before the storm got worse. She told herself this had nothing to do with the forest. She was only checking the tree line, not going in. But the deer's tracks led straight past the broken fence and into the trees, and Mira, muttering every complaint she could think of, followed them anyway. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time she found, not the deer, but something else entirely. At first she thought it was a fallen log, gray and still in the mud. Then it moved, and she realized it was breathing, and then she realized it was not a log at all. It was a wolf, but bigger than any wolf she had ever seen in a textbook or a nature documentary, its side torn open and bleeding into the wet leaves. Its breathing came in short, uneven pulls, the kind that told her, even without a veterinary degree, that this animal did not have long left. Every rule of common sense told her to walk away. Wild animals were unpredictable, even when they were healthy, and a wounded predator was more dangerous, not less. But Mira had spent her whole career picking up broken things and trying to fix them, and some habits do not turn off just because the situation feels wrong. She ran back for the truck, brought a tarp and a first aid kit meant for foxes and raccoons, and spent the next hour doing the only thing she knew how to do: cleaning a wound, applying pressure, keeping something alive that probably should not have been. By the time she dragged the wolf onto the tarp and pulled him into the old barn behind the rescue center, her arms ached and her clothes were ruined, but the wolf was still breathing. She packed the wound as best she could, gave him water from a bowl he was too weak to lift his head for, and finally, sometime near 3 in the morning, she sat down in the hay beside him, because leaving felt like a decision she would have to live with for the rest of her life. She did not remember falling asleep. She only remembered waking up to the sound of a man's voice. "You didn't have to do that." Mira sat up so fast her back protested. The wolf was gone. In its place, lying in the same spot on the tarp, was a man. He was pale, breathing hard, with a wound along his side in almost the exact same place the wolf's had been. His eyes were silver, a color that did not occur naturally in anyone she had ever met, and he was watching her with an expression she could not read, somewhere between exhaustion and disbelief. Mira could not finish the sentence. There was no sentence that made sense. "Rurik," he said, as though that explained everything. "And you're Mira. You've been feeding me water from a bowl meant for raccoons." She should have screamed. She should have run for the house, locked the door, called someone, anyone. Instead, she sat frozen in the hay, staring at a man who had been a dying wolf 20 minutes earlier, and asked the only question her mind could form. "How do you know my name?" Rurik did not answer right away. He looked at her wrist instead, at the old scar that ran along it, thin and white now after 3 years of healing. Mira's stomach dropped before he even said anything, because she recognized that look. It was the look of someone who already knew the story behind that scar. "That happened here," he said quietly, "in this forest." "How do you know that?" He was quiet for a long moment, long enough that the barn felt smaller, the rain outside louder. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost whatever warmth it carried before. "Because I was there." The words did not make sense at first. Mira's mind tried to build a bridge between what he was saying and what she wanted to believe, but there was no bridge sturdy enough. He was telling her, as plainly as anyone could, that the creature responsible for her sister's attack 3 years ago, the one that had never been caught, the one that had changed her family in ways that never fully healed, was him. "Get out," she said, standing up so fast the hay scattered. "Get out of this barn." "I'm not asking you to forgive it," Rurik said, still lying there, too weak to move even if he wanted to. "I'm only telling you the truth, because you deserve that much after everything you just did for me." Mira wanted to hate him. She wanted the anger to be simple, clean, the kind of anger that made decisions easy. But standing there in the gray morning light, looking at the man who was somehow also the wolf she had spent the night keeping alive, she found that her anger, and her guilt, and her confusion were all tangled together in a knot she did not know how to undo. "Why should I believe anything you say?" "You shouldn't," he admitted. "But I'm too weak to lie convincingly right now, so this is probably the most honest conversation we'll ever have." Despite herself, Mira almost laughed. She caught it before it escaped, but he noticed anyway, and something in his shoulders relaxed just slightly. Over the next hour, as the storm finally broke into thin morning light, Rurik told her pieces of the truth, though never all of it at once. He was not simply a wolf who could become a man. He was the leader of a pack that lived on the edges of Blackthorn Forest, hidden from a town that had long since stopped believing such things were possible. Leadership among his kind was not given, it was taken, and taken again by anyone strong enough to challenge for it. 3 years ago, a challenge from a rival named Sever had gone wrong, spilling out of the deep forest and into the tree line where Mira's sister happened to be walking that night. It was not supposed to happen. It was, Rurik said, the worst mistake of his life, one he had never been able to undo or explain to the people it hurt. Mira listened, arms crossed, jaw tight, because listening felt like the only useful thing she could do with the anger that had nowhere else to go. "That doesn't fix anything," she said when he finished. "No," he agreed, "it doesn't." By midday, word had reached his pack that their leader was healing on rescue center land, in the territory of a woman with no claim to their world at all. Mira noticed them before Rurik did, dark shapes moving at the tree line, watching the barn with the kind of patience that made her skin prickle. When she pointed them out, Rurik's expression changed, the exhaustion replaced by something sharper. "They don't trust you," he said, "and after this morning, I understand why. I don't need them to trust me. I need them to leave." "They will," he said, "once I can stand on my own, without a raccoon's water bowl." That afternoon, the real danger arrived. Sever, the same rival who had wounded Rurik and set off the events of 3 years ago, appeared at the edge of the property, confident and unhurried, the posture of someone who believed the fight was already over. Rurik was still too weak to defend himself properly, and Mira understood, with a clarity that surprised her, that she was the only thing standing between an old rivalry finishing itself in her backyard. She grabbed the only weapon she had, an old shotgun kept in the barn for scaring off coyotes, and stepped between the two of them before she had time to think better of it. "This isn't your fight," Sever said, his voice carrying the same strange, layered quality Rurik's had. "It is now," Mira answered, and she did not lower the gun. It bought Rurik just enough time. Weak as he was still faster than Sever expected, and the challenge ended before it could fully begin, Sever retreating back into the trees, the way a storm retreats once it has spent its worst on the land. The pack, watching from the tree line, seemed to understand something had shifted, and by the time the sun dropped low over the barn roof, they had gone quiet and still. Rurik knelt in the doorway afterward, not as a wolf, not as a king, but as the same broken thing Mira had pulled out of the mud the night before. "I don't get to ask you to forgive what happened to your sister," he said. "I'm asking you to let me be the one who tries to make it right, in whatever way that's even possible." Mira did not answer right away. She looked past him, toward the tree line she had avoided for 3 years, the one she had just stood in front of, with a shotgun, and a man who had once been the thing she feared most. She did not forgive him, not that morning, and maybe not for a long time after. But she did not turn away from him either, and as the sun rose fully over Blackthorn Forest, casting long gold light across a barn that smelled like rain and hay, and something that had almost ended, Mira Calloway understood that whatever came next, She was no longer running from the trees. She was standing at the edge of them, waiting to see what would happen if, for once, she stayed.